It is happening again. With all the rumors circulating about Brandon Ingram wanting out of New Orleans, the San Antonio Spurs are once again linked to the All-Star forward, this time in a blockbuster 3-team deal that honestly just has me left scratching my head. I'll be diving into all that crazy stuff. Plus, a recent article from Sports Illustrated highlights a very important question for the Spurs and who the solution just could be. We're going to get into a lot of very interesting stuff coming up on this episode of Spurs Digest. But guys, before we get into the video, still 95% of you watching every single video are not subscribed, and we are so close to 1,000 subscribers. That has been our goal since we started the channel just over a month ago. We'd love to hit that before the season. If you guys want to help us out, you want daily Spurs news, rumors, reports, trades, all that good stuff, this is your home for it. So hit that subscribe button down below, completely free, super easy, and you can stay up to date on all things Spurs. Without further ado, I want to jump into this. And it's a very interesting question, and the article for this will be linked down below because I think it's pretty thought-provoking, and I think you guys will think so as well. That's a lot of thinking. So we're going to dive right into this first off, and it's a question about the Spurs shooting. The question comes from Chase James, I believe is how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. MS, I don't know the last name. I apologize. But who will be San Antonio's most impactful sharpshooter this season? Of course, Harrison Barnes is there in the thumbnail, but this is something I wanted to bring up and just discuss. Because, of course, the Spurs, over the course of many, many years, have had so many phenomenal shooters. I mean, we all remember Danny Green setting the finals record for threes, my boy Gary Neal, Patty Mills, right? And, I mean, there's many more before. There's going to be many after. Dougie McBuckets recently. I can go on and on and on. I'm not going to go listing every sharpshooter in Spurs history. You'll all probably have your choice that you want to say as well. But when it comes to this upcoming season, sharpshooting is going to be something that is very important for San Antonio, and I do think there'll be more opportunities than ever for three-point shooting, and we'll dive into that a bit as well in the Brandon Ingram section. But when you have a guy like Victor Wembanyama, who has so much gravity, and now you have a point guard like Chris Paul, who is also backed up by Tre Jones, two guys that can legitimately create a lot of three-point opportunities by way of ball movement, by drawing in the defense, yada, yada, yada. If your open shooters are not hitting their threes, that could drastically impact your game. So this question is extremely important. And the first guy I did want to dive into is Harrison Barnes, because I feel like people start to sleep on him. I don't know what it is, but Harrison Barnes is still a very good player. He's 32 years old, Black Falcon, incredible nickname as well. He only averaged 12 points a game last year. He's only averaging 14 for his career, but guys, he shot almost 39% from three, and it wasn't a negligible amount of attempts either. I'm pretty sure he was attempting 4 or 5 a game. Maybe it might have been more. I could be wrong. I don't actually remember. I probably should have included that in the screenshot, but you can't always be perfect when you're doing these videos. But Harrison Barnes, this guy, I think is going to have... look, this might be a super hot take. My call right now is that this is going to be the best shooting season of Harrison Barnes' career, and here is why. Because when you have Chris Paul, automatically you get a +5 boost to all your shooting stats, right? You're going to catch the ball in the seams the way you like it. You're going to find yourself open way more, or maybe you're not even going to find yourself open. You're just going to get the ball when you wouldn't have expected to get the ball when you're open way more with a guy like Chris Paul on the floor, not to mention Wemby, who is just going to keep improving as a passer year after year. And Harrison Barnes, as he's aging, he's not going to be asked to do that kind of ISO scoring that he did a couple of years ago. And he's already started to decline in that. And you can see his three-point percentage, as the years have gone on, has actually started to kind of climb steadily. Not every single year, but he's been doing quite well this past season. Like I said, like you can see here, shot 39% from three. And that alone can be an incredible difference maker for San Antonio. So for me, it's very simple. I look at the article, they show Harrison Barnes, I say Harrison Barnes, but there's a couple guys I wanted to mention too, and most of all, I want to get your guys' opinion. Let's focus on me here. What is the camera doing? Who do you think is going to be the Spurs' most important sharpshooter? Because I think there's arguments for a lot of guys. Chris Paul not declining drastically from three will matter a lot, of course. Devin Vassell was also mentioned in this article. But there are a couple guys I wanted to mention as well. Julian Champagnie, as much as a lot of people don't necessarily like having him out there, I feel like we all forget he shot 37% from three last year. It's not some elite mark, but it's really not bad. And when we're talking about important sharpshooters, it doesn't necessarily mean the people with the most volume who are shooting the highest percentage. Now, if Harrison Barnes comes out and starts shooting 6-7 threes a game and is hitting it at 42%, yeah, he's the most important shooter. But I actually think that there's two guys that I want to name that could be very important shooters, right? Keldon Johnson is a guy I'm going to put to the side. We're going to talk about him later. He's kind of a 35% three-point shooter. To me, we kind of know what he is. But to me, there's two more guys that deserve mentioning. My answer is Harrison Barnes, but I wanted to mention Jeremy Sochan, and I wanted to mention Victor Wembanyama, because obviously, if Victor turns in to like a 37-38% three-point shooter, especially with the type of shots he's taking, pull-ups, step-backs, he's doing every single kind of three you can imagine, if he can raise his percentage just a few points, to me then there's no other answer other than him. And the other guy, again, Jeremy Sochan, if he can turn into an elite shooter, and maybe not even elite, just like above league average shooter, that changes the whole game plan against him. So I actually think there's a ton of fantastic answers to this question, and I want to hear all your thoughts down below, because I think this is a really great discussion. And go amongst yourselves, ask me, ask the fellow commenters, because I think this is going to be a very interesting season to see how the Spurs progress in the next few seasons. But we're talking about the Spurs now. We're talking about how we want them to be competitive, how, we want them to have these great shooters. We want them to win games. Well, here's the thing. If we really, really want to jump into a contention window, something might have to go down, including a more ridiculous trade. Now, I've covered some crazy things on this channel. I covered some Tre Young stuff. We've had Brandon Ingram trade rumors on this channel before already, and fun thing, this is actually from the same guy. I think it was me in the last time doing these Brandon Ingram videos, and it's Andy Bailey from Bleacher Report. Article linked down below. It is an interesting read, so go check it out, but I'm just going to bring it up here. He goes, 3-team trade idea to pair Brandon Ingram with Spurs Victor Wembanyama. And look, I talked about this at length last time. Feel free to go back and check out the last Brandon Ingram trade rumor video. I'm not sold on Brandon Ingram being a fit, but after looking at this trade, I'm even less sold, and I'm going to explain to you why. So let me just bring up the trade so you guys can all see this here. It's this button there. There we go. So basically, we'll just focus on the Spurs side of this, because there is some crazy Pelicans Cavs stuff going on, but I don't care about any of that. The Spurs, they get Brandon Ingram and Dean Wade. I mean, let's be honest, this is really a Dean Wade trade and not a Brandon Ingram trade, but, we'll talk about Ingram because he's obviously the bigger name. So the Spurs give up Keldon Johnson, Zach Collins, Julian Champagnie, and a top 5 protected 2029 first-round pick, basically in exchange for Brandon Ingram. Okay, so on a first reaction, you're like, okay, Keldon Johnson, I mean, some Spurs fans still hold him in high regard. Some Spurs fans have given up on him. I still like him. I think he's getting unnecessarily hated on. That's my opinion. I think there's some of you out there who agree with me. However, I also understand if you're not a huge fan of Keldon, is what it is. Zach Collins, if he can learn to shoot again, my gosh, he's another guy you can mention for that first part of this video. Gosh, there's so many guys who could be good shooters this year. Julian Champagnie and a top 5 protect. Like, you look at that value there, none of those guys are all-stars. Keldon is the closest to being there, of course. I mean, he's been at like a 20-point-per-game scorer. Brandon Ingram is like a legit, on a very, very good team, like a championship caliber team, he's a second option type of guy. Like, this dude is a really good player, and he's a solid all-around player. He's not really a terrible defender. In fact, he's quite long, and he can make lots of great defensive plays, and he's great on offense. And, like, if we just bring up his numbers, like, this dude's amazing, right? 21 points a game last season in 64 games. That was a bit of a down season for him. He's had some better years. 5 boards, 6 assists. He's pretty efficient. His three-point percentage has never been that high, but he kind of relies a lot on iso ball as well. So on a team that has maybe more other options that can work with him a bit better, like Chris Paul, like Victor Wembanyama, he could fit well in the Spurs. And I wanted to get into what Andy Bailey actually had to say about this. He basically said that the Spurs are coming off a season where they were plus 10.2 per 100 possessions with Tre Jones, Wembanyama, and Devin Vassell on the floor. Decent wing, real point guard, and Victor. This season, they're going to go with, if you want to go with that same type of lineup, it's going to be Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, and Harrison Barnes are 2 decent wingers, and Victor Wembanyama. And what if you could just put Brandon Ingram in there as well? So that could really make a lot of sense for the Spurs. However, first off, we go back to this. You might have noticed that this trade also can't happen until January because of Jarrett Allen, right? So this is a trade deadline type of deal. Fair enough. Andy Bailey's assuming that the Spurs at this point are winning games and they want to go for more. They want to make that push. Okay, we're talking trade deadline here. We're talking Brandon Ingram at the trade deadline for Keldon, Zach Collins, Julian Champagnie, and a top 5 protected pick. What's the problem there? The problem is this is Brandon Ingram's last year of his contract. Brandon Ingram's in a contract year. He's an unrestricted free agent after the year. And there is no need for the Spurs to go all in on this unless they have a plan to ink Brandon Ingram to an extension, unless that's like part of the deal. So I guess you can kind of assume that here, but there's an inherent risk with that too, right? Signing a guy to an extension if you don't even know if he fits with your system, your culture, so many question marks around there. And look, I could go on and on. I could make this a 25-minute video. I'm not going to do that. I know you guys get where I'm coming from. First off, I'm not saying he'd be a bad Spur. I think he could fit well. I think he actually looks good in these photoshopped Spurs jerseys, or totally real Spurs jerseys that we take pictures of. But Brandon Ingram would fit incredibly well next to Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama. That right there is easily a playoff team. But at the end of the day, if you're only guaranteed the end of this season, this payment is not worth it. If you're guaranteeing that you get 21, 22 point per game, 50% from the field, 38% from three, Brandon Ingram for another 4 seasons after this, yeah, I think this is absolutely worth it. But there's a big risk with that. There's an inherent risk with that. Brandon Ingram is a great player, like I've said, but I'm just not sold on this trade. It just keeps having me scratching my head. I want to hear your guys' opinions. We've been talking about Ingram a lot, and I know you guys love talking about Ingram too. So leave your thoughts down below on this whole thing, because to me, you know what? I just don't think I can get behind it. But, there's going to be a lot more trade rumors coming the rest of this offseason into next season as we get towards the trade deadline. It's never going to stop. The Spurs are just on the cusp of becoming something big. We're going to be a free agent destination. We're going to be a target for a lot of people to get traded to just to play with Victor. It's going to be some exciting times. And if you want to stick up to date on all the latest Spurs news throughout this incredible rebuild, throughout Victor Wembanyama's future GOAT career, hit the subscribe button down below. Stick with us in Spurs Digest. We got your back. I've been your host, Josh Gosse. I'll catch you in the next one.